Everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a interesting 7-game NBA slate for you. We also have a 2-game college basketball slate for you. So before I get started, can you guys smack that like and subscribe button? I'm going to run through college basketball first very quickly. It's a very easy slate here, or a short slate here with just 2 games. Wake Forest versus UNC and Cincinnati versus Kansas. Both these games have 8-point spreads and UNC and Kansas' favor, and both of them are pretty close in total points. However, the UNC game is slightly higher than the Kansas game, but it's negligible at this point. All four teams, both games have very similar outcomes. UNC and Kansas, obviously the favorites. Wake Forest and Cincinnati are the weak teams. Cincinnati is probably the weakest of the 4 teams as well, so do keep that in mind. But let's go and get into my top plays here. So I do have some core plays here with McCullough, Dickinson, and Furphy. I'll get into those when I talk about Kansas. We're going to start with Wake Forest first, though. They're facing UNC, and they are the better of the weaker teams on the slate, as they are one of the better defending teams, and they have a good offense, and they also push the ball and play, so that does help for this slate. And so we do have a few players that have some interest here, though they are all C level grades. I've got most of the players at A's, B's, or C's here, and most of the Wake Forest players that are in play are C level with one exception. So Hunter Silas is the first guy here at $7,000. He's actually played pretty well. His range today is 20 to 36 fantasy points. He needs 28 though, so he's a little bit under. If you think Wake Forest can keep this game close, then he would definitely have some potential here. Same goes for Kevin Miller for them. He's got a range similar at 20 to 34, but he needs 28 as well on the slate. Andrew Carr also has a pretty similar range at 20 to 34, though he does need a little bit, or sorry, 20 to 35, but he does need a few less fantasy points to pay off here because he's a little bit cheaper. But that said, he's still in interestingly tough play on the slate. Again, if you like Wake Forest to win, then he would be in play. F. John Reed is kind of the exception on this team. He has a little bit more upside as his floor is around 20 fantasy points for this game, and he only needs 24 to pay off, so that's actually a pretty decent point total for him. So I do like him a little bit more than the rest of the players on Wake Forest, and if you're just going to pick one player off, he's not a bad way to go. Also, Monsanto for Wake Forest. He's dirt cheap. He only played the last game for his first game of the season. He only played 11 minutes, but he actually managed to do very well. He was good last year for them. His price will rise as he gets more minutes. I expect him to average 24 minutes the rest of the way, but he does need to get into the swing of things, so I look for him to get a few more minutes in this next game, though this is a tougher matchup than their first game against Louisville was, so I expect him to have some potential here, but he definitely carries a lot of risk. Looking at Cincinnati, they're the other upside down team on this slate. Now, Cincinnati has a pretty slow down pace, and their offense isn't very good. While their defense can be capable, it's going to be tough for them to stay close in this game. The 3 players that we like at all from Cincinnati are high risk, as they are C level grades, and they do have pretty low floors. But Lincoln is the top guy. He's got an 18 to 30 range, but he does need 26 to pay off here, so he's pretty much avoidable for the most part, unless you think Cincinnati is going to catch Kansas sleeping. Same with John Newman. He does have some potential today, as his range is 16 to 28, but he still needs 24 fantasy points to pay off here. And the only guy that I think is actually a decent play for them is Aziz Bendago. He definitely has a lower floor at 16 to 25 total points potential. Excuse me. He has a expected range of 16 to 25, but he only needs 20 fantasy points to pay off. So he does have a little bit more potential, though you do have to remember he does have a lower floor, and this is a high risk matchup for them. Looking at North Carolina, this is a team that you could definitely potentially stack. We have 4 guys I like a lot here. One being R.J. Davis. He's played absolutely phenomenal lately. His range today is 25 to 45, and he only needs 30 fantasy points to pay off here. He's been absolutely solid lately, though he does need a little bit higher than what I think he'll get. He's definitely capable on the slate. If you want to stack this team, he's a definite way to go. Baycott, also a guy that I like today, as he's played fairly well lately, and he has a range of 28 to 40, but he's been He only needs 32 to pay off today. I think he's a little bit safer than RJ Davis when it comes to just one-off options, and so he's definitely in play on the slate. Ingram is an interesting play as well for them, as his price at $7,000 is actually not bad. He does have a range of 23 to 34, but he only needs 28 to pay off, and I think he can do that today, especially in this matchup. Looking at Ryan for North Carolina, he has some potential today being a value play. His range is lower than we like at 15 to 22, and he's had a couple of random off games, but he only needs 18 to pay off, and he's a pretty good value play on the slate. And then we're going to look at Kansas. Now, this is where I like my core plays here. Kevin McCullough being the top overall guy for the team, outside of Hunter Dickinson at least. He has an A grade for me today. He has a 30 to 40 range, and he needs 32 to pay off. I think he's a great option. He's a little bit underpriced here. Hunter Dickinson also actually come down in price a little bit due to the fact that he's had a couple off games. But this is a good matchup for him. I think he's going to have an A type of game. He needs 36 fantasy points to pay off today, and I think his floor for today's game is 35. Looking at KJ Adams, he's also an interesting play, and he's actually pretty good priced here, though he does have a low floor of just 21, but he does need just 26 to pay off today, and he has a B grade for this game with a 21 to 33 range on this game. Looking at Dejon Harris, I actually like him a little bit better than Adams, simply because his range is a little bit tighter with a 20 to 28 range and only needs 24 to pay off today. And then finally, my last core play is Murphy for them. Now, he's only started the last 3 games, but as you can see, his minutes have ramped up the last 2 games. I expect him to have a pretty consistent minutes over 25 at least the rest of the way, as long as he's playing well, which he is. At this price, he's just a little bit too cheap for his potential today, as his floor is 15 to 30. On this one, he needs 22 fantasy points to pay off, but I think he'll likely get over that now that he's starting. So overall, I like the slate. It's just 2 games, and there's a lot of different ways you can build it. There is some value today, but you're not gonna be able to stack up like Hunter Dickinson and Armando Bacot and Harris and Ingram. You're gonna have to play around a little bit to try to fix which guys you want to put in there, but I do think there's the capability of having some solid lineups. However, like I said, there's not a ton of value, so you can't really stack up and put some minimum price guys, but it's still a decent slate. Looking at the NBA, this slate gets a little bit rough. We have 7 game slate here. So we have a pretty good solid set of games. However, we have a few games with some really high totals. The Boston-Dallas game, the San Antonio Spurs-Philadelphia 76ers game, and the Milwaukee-Detroit game all have super high totals for the slate. So let's get an injury report. For the Pistons, Cunningham is doubtful and Stewart is questionable. For the Cavs, LeVert is questionable. Mobley and Garland are out. For the Magic, Franz Wagner, Carter Jr., Ingles, and Harris are questionable, and then Isaac and Fultz are doubtful. For the Spurs, Collins and Barlow are questionable. For the 76ers, Melton and Covington are out. For the Grizzlies, Tillman is questionable, and Morant, Bain, Smart, and Rose are out. For the Raptors, Potel remains out. For the Hornets, Ball is questionable, Richards is questionable, and then Williams and Hayward are out. For the Celtics, Porzingis is questionable. For the Mavs, Exum is out. And for the Bulls, Levine and Craig are out. So we have a lot of interesting plays on this slate. Core plays are kind of rough today. I didn't really feel like anybody extremely jumped off the page, but if I was going to go with anybody, it would be Joel Embiid. He's played absolutely phenomenal lately. He's got a great matchup here against the Spurs, who he's going to trash, and they have one of the higher totals on the slate, the second highest. The Spurs centers are also hurt, so it's unlikely that they're going to have much to throw at him to slow him down. He's been absolutely phenomenal lately. He's a great play on the slate, but we do have a lot of good options at center today. Sorry. Jalen Duren also looks very good for Detroit. He's played pretty good so far this season, especially when Stewart misses. And while Stewart is questionable, he definitely has some potential in this game. But it is a little bit of a tougher matchup. He didn't do particularly great in the last game against Milwaukee, but he still has a lot of potential today, so he's worth a look. And in the other game he played against them, he was phenomenal. So, he's got an up and down so far, but this game has a high total, and a lot of guys for Detroit are in play. Jaden Ivey being another guy. With cutting him out, his usage is going up, and as you can see, he's been playing very well lately. He's got a lot of potential. He's also extremely close to being a core play. In fact, I think I'm just going to make him one, as he does have that great potential lately. Looking at Scotty Barnes here for Toronto, he's going to get more usage as a result of Siakam now gone. He looks like he and Emmanuel quickly are going to be, and well, also RJ Barrett are going to be the three big guys for them now. And I expect him to have some really big games. His price is still pretty high, but it's come down some. But I think his usage will be high today. And as long as he doesn't shoot absolutely terribly like he did against the Knicks, he'll be fine, as he is a stacked stuffer, very close to being a core play as well. Looking at Manuel quickly for Toronto, he definitely carries a little bit more risk as his price is up. But he's been playing very well since he's joined Toronto and he's starting. He's got a lot of potential, especially when he hits threes and shoots the ball well. He also been getting a lot of assists, which is really helping pad his stats. And he's a pretty good rebounding guard as well as underrated defensively. Looking at Giannis, now he is probable today, so I expect him to play. But if he was somehow not out, or somehow if he was ruled out, that would definitely open up a lot of value for Milwaukee. But right now he's in play. He's a contrarian play off of Embiid as they're similar priced, and but he's in play as a reasonable option on the slate in a high tempo matchup. Rudy Gobert from Minnesota is in play today, but he definitely carries some risk. However, he's played pretty well lately. His price has come up as a result, but I think he's got a lot of upside in this matchup against a team that has played absolutely terrible against big guys. Looking at RJ Barrett for Toronto, he's also going to have an increase in usage as the next few games go on, and his price is going to have to adapt a little bit more. I expect it to go up some, but right now he's got a pretty good matchup here, and he has some good potential in this game, so he's definitely in play. Looking at Vucevic for the Bulls, he has had some rough games, but with all the injuries to the Bulls, he's getting a lot more usage lately, and he has some potential for those big games. He's obviously a GPP play because of his lower floor lately, but he has a high ceiling because, as you can see, in 2 of the last 5 games, he scored 59 fantasy points. He's capable of that in and out, so I do like his potential here, even though it is a tough matchup. DeMar DeRozan's in a similar boat. He's been inconsistent, but with all the injuries, he does have blow-up games, and he has blow-up games just like Vucevic does, where he can have absolutely monster games. As you can see, he had 55 against Golden State Warriors the other day. He plays all sorts of minutes. He's just a matter of getting him over the hump and having good fourth quarters is where as long as the game stays close enough. Now, that game does have a pretty tight spread of just 5 points, so I think it's possible for those two guys to do well. And then if Ball was to be ruled out, Rozier would become a core play as he has been phenomenal when Ball was out, and he will have some potential today in that front, but he's definitely risky. I do have a bunch of value plays to talk about real quick, so I'm just going to run through these as quickly as I can. Mike Conley for Minnesota, he's been up and down recently, but he definitely has some potential in this game, and he's nice priced again in a great matchup here, but he definitely carries some risk. Wendell Carter Jr. is actually currently questionable, but if he does draw the start and he does play, he'll become a great play on the slate. I would actually make him a core play if he starts, as his price is still just too cheap for his potential. He's had some really good games lately, and his minutes are ramping up as he's finally healthy. Naz Reid is also in play for Minnesota. He's a little bit cheaper, but he's played pretty well, though he is inconsistent, but he has that good matchup and top tier upside. John Tay Porter for Toronto is starting for them. The last few games have total out. Now he has a pretty low floor, but he has a good ceiling, as he's shown it a few games. He's still risky, but he definitely has some upside in this matchup against Memphis, who's been pretty subpar lately. Trent Jr. For Toronto also in play. If he gets in the if he does start, he definitely has some potential, though he does carry a lot of risk as he's been really up and down lately. Also in play for Detroit. He's had some really good games lately. He has some absolutely high upside, and he's nice and cheap. He can 10x if he has a big game, which he's had a few of them lately. But he is capable of that, and he gets a lot of upside in this matchup as well. Looking at Xavier Tillman, if he plays, he is questionable currently. He would have some utility here. He's playing a lot of minutes with all the injuries to the Grizzlies, and he's nice and cheap today, so he's definitely worth a look. Also for Memphis, the starter, if whoever starts for this team that is under $6,200 will have some utility today, and that's Gilliard, Z Williams, V Williams, Kennard, Conchar, Roddy, and Aldama. A couple of those guys will start, and if whoever starts will have some utility as a value play. So there's actually quite a lot of value today, though there's a lot of risk there. The overall, you can make lineups a lot of different ways in this slate. So it's definitely an interesting slate and should be a good one. Thank you guys for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. And have a nice day, guys.